as we mentioned at the top of the show, we're at the EtQ conference at Squaw Creek Resort, and part of what is covered at this show is the topic of risk management. Now, this week we had a very good article on risk management by Tim Lozier of EtQ, and we are pleased to have Tim on the show with us today to talk a little bit more in depth on what risk management is and what it means for business. So Tim, thank you for joining us on the show. And actually, before we get going into risk management, I know that corrective action, preventive action, I mean, this is all part of things that are covered by EtQ software as well. Am I right?
Oh yeah, corrective action, it's the heart of the quality system. It's where you take action on any of the events that have happened in your organization. And really the key to corrective action is making sure you're making the right decisions and impacting those corrective actions, making sure that they're coming across and actually fostering continuous improvement.
Okay, and that's all part of our topic, which is going to be risk management. So before we get more in depth into risk management, just give us kind of a brief overview of what risk management is. When people, I mean, the term is showing up a lot now, even in mainstream media. So when people say risk management, what are we talking about?
Well, everybody has a different definition, don't they? But at its core, risk management is identifying hazards. You're finding problems, you're finding challenges, and you're making decisions based on them. And many ways of doing that, but ultimately, you're looking at that from a holistic standpoint, a systematic and universal way. Risk management is a process that's objective, it's universal, and it's repeatable. And a lot of times, whether you're in finance, whether you're in human capital, whether you're in quality, whether you're in safety, any compliance activity is going to require decision making. And industries move fast, and people are looking for a systematic, objective way to make these decisions, and something that's translatable across not just one part of the industry, but all parts. So that's what risk management is at its core.
Okay. So there's a component of anticipation here we're talking about, right?
Well, yeah, in a sense, you're looking at the data that you have. You're looking at events that are coming into your system, and you're trying to figure out what the ultimate risks are. So how can we make better decisions, and how can we do it in a consistent manner? So that's really kind of the core of risk.
Well, when we talk about risk management, is this? I can see companies are going to think, oh, now we have to deal with like risk management. So is this going to be some new department, or are you going to have a risk management manager, or does this tie into existing programs like your ISO 9000 program or whatever?
Sure, and you know, there's tons of different methodologies that people use when they think of risk management. But the reality is risk management is so pervasive across the different areas of the organization that having a single area where one department is doing risk isn't necessarily the right approach. A lot of companies are taking the different operational areas. They're taking people from quality, people from safety, people from finance, all over the place, and they're coming together and assembling a risk team. Being able to look at risks from these different areas, being able to translate those risks and make decisions from top level to shop level.
So this go ahead.
Well, do you find though that even though there's a cross-functional team from a wide area, wide set of departments, is there one area in the company that more commonly the activity tends to be resident in? Yeah,
and really in its core, most companies have a compliance department or a compliance area, whether it's in the governance area, governance, risk, and compliance is popping up. But a lot of companies are taking from there, and they're also expanding out to the other operational areas. So risk does have a center. But a lot of times, best-in-class companies are looking at it and saying risk is not just not centered on GRC. We're seeing risk in our safety department. We're seeing risk in quality. We want to be able to use that technology and that methodology to really drive business innovation in this complex world that we have.
So when we say risk, the definition of risk is going to vary depending on department, right? Or depending on function. So, risk could be risk of product failure. So we're talking maybe product liability,
sure.
or lost sales. Risk could be health and safety within the organization itself.
Absolutely.
Lawsuits because an employee is hurt. I mean, are we even covering that aspect of it as well then?
Oh yeah, I think you should. I mean, I think most companies are looking at it from that perspective. How far-reaching it gets to every operational area is really dependent on the organization. But ultimately, a lot of times people are doing risk assessments and they don't even know they're doing risk. They're looking at job safety analysis and they're saying, well, how can I make my job safer? What hazards am I looking at and how can I mitigate those, put controls in place to make these jobs safer?
as people are looking at risk, I mean, this thought just occurred to me, and I hope I'm not throwing you a curveball here. but are they discovering that let's say they're a medical device manufacturer,
okay,
and obviously there's risk associated with being a medical device manufacturer, product liability, harm and death and that sort of stuff. As they're starting to look at the risk factors, are they discovering that there are factors that apply to that particular risk that come from areas they weren't even thinking of? I mean, as things they may not have even thought of until they actually started looking at everything from a risk point of view.
And it's a great point. A lot of times you stay siloed into your individual process. But the nice thing about risk management is it's universal. So it's a universal metric for looking at adverse events and how they impact it. So take the example of someone being on a production line and they're putting out non-conforming products, and you're looking at that product coming out, and there's high risk associated with the quality of that product. Well, there could also be safety implications. That person could not be properly trained who's on that line. So maybe that lot is producing high-risk goods, but it could be a factor of someone's safety. It could be a safety factor. So you could be looking at someone saying, well, they haven't been trained. They haven't been trained properly, and they are a liability. It's not necessarily the product, it's the people who are making it that might need more training. And so the risk is being able to, if you can roll up risk from quality and safety, now you're looking at it in a bigger picture. Now you're seeing the different decisions that are being shown up to you.
Could we also pull into that, for example, the damage done to your reputation by putting out bad products and the bad publicity associated with that, and perhaps attach some financial penalties that might be associated to that by customers simply not buying your product?
And sure. I mean, when you look at anything with an organization, you always want to factor in what the post-market reaction is going to be, and how are we going to say what is the impact of quality, what is the impact of poor quality on our customers? How can we build risk into the production process so when we release that product, we've mitigated as much as we possibly can. Now, just to caveat that, is risk going to give you 100% compliance? Probably not. It's never going to. 100% compliance is always going to be an achievement that most is kind of lofty. But what happens is by mitigating your risk throughout the process, you're giving yourself a great chance to have the highest compliant product that comes out. And so that's why companies are taking this approach to say, we can create a risk benchmark within the product life cycle, within the safety program, within security, within governance, and now we're able to look at it at an aggregate level and start making decisions from that point on.
Well, let's dig into this a little bit further. So, I mean, we've talked about kind of the large view. We're going to manage our risk, whatever that means. So, obviously, we're talking about now we have to start collecting data. We have to start seeing, what are our risk factors? What does the data show in terms of where we're open up to liability? What kind of failures have we had in various functions, whatever those functions are, right? So now we're talking about a big data collection process. Once all this data comes in, how do you decide? I mean, I'm sure with a larger company there must be thousands of risk factors. I mean, how do they decide which one to elevate to the top in order to start addressing that risk immediately if it's an important risk?
Right, and so when you get that data, so we could take, for example, post-market feedback that comes in. People get tons of post-market feedback, adverse events, customer complaints. How do you discern which ones are the most critical? How do you figure out which ones you need to address? And a lot of times companies have looked at it by date. What's the most overdue? We got to get to that one. That's the one we get to overdue. Well, that's not necessarily the best approach, because you may have a complaint that came in that's detrimental, that's super high risk, and you're not going to get to it because it's not overdue yet. So what risk has enabled companies to do is filter their data by risk, so that now the most critical issues rise to the top. We can address those quickly, and we can be more compliant faster. We can address them and get to them faster. So that's
well, let's get into, because obviously we're talking to somebody from EtQ. EtQ is a software company, so they've got kind of an angle they're working here. But this is very important. In order to make this easier, in order to make this even possible to do, looking at risk factors for a small company, probably fairly straightforward. But if you're a large company, you have all this data coming in, you probably need some sort of automation to do this. So, I mean, tell us how technology helps companies to determine what is important for them in terms of risk and what items to be addressing first.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, technology's role is to aid in the process. We always say that risk management is a process just like anything else. It has to have the steps and it has to have people behind it. But what the software is able to do is really compile that data, put that data into a system, and be able to do quantitative analysis and help make those decisions. And furthermore, it's able to automate the process. It's able to escalate if it's not getting done. It's able to delegate if it's going to the wrong people. It's able to bring the process through and actually streamline it. You know, for anybody who's doing quality management, safety management, risk is a great tool for filtering, and the software is there to help. You know, and I caveat that saying because a lot of times people will come to us and say, well, you're going to solve all our risk management problems. Well, yeah, we will. We'll automate them. But really, you need to know what it is that you want to do with risk. So there's many different ways to calculate risk, and there's many different ways to interpret risk. And so that's why we always recommend have a risk team. Have a team in place that's going to be able to sit down and make decisions and assess those risks, and the software will help. That's what it's designed for.
See, now, when you say that, you know, a customer says, oh, you guys are going to solve all our risk problems, that to me says that they're missing a point, that they need to embrace the underlying principles that support with it. You can provide the tools that make the automation and the compilation of the data so necessary, but first they've got to have the culture and the mindset of what it is that risk management is, and then they can use simply the tools that make it possible.
Exactly, and that's something that we've been talking about for many years. You know, we were one of the first companies to actually do quantitative risk management, and so what we've been able to do is help people take their risk management processes and really drill down and automate that and provide them this visibility that's unparalleled. So now, because risk is universal, they can actually bring it to the C-levels in their organization, the top levels of the organization, and rather than talk specifically on a quality or safety level, they can talk on a risk level, and that really resonates within the company.
So it sounds like some of your training also not just deals with how to use the software, but it deals with cultural, philosophical, and principle issues.
Sure.
And I like that point. As I mean, and this is something that we've kind of hammered home to a lot of our viewers. Regardless of what the product is, whether it's a software product or hardware product, if there's a vendor out there that's going to come in and just say, hey, buy our product and your problems all go away, it's like you said, it's a process. I mean, any kind of product, whether it's a software product or a hardware product, is a tool, and it's something that's got to be integrated. So it's just that you guys actually provide some sort of services in terms of, look, you've got to build these things into your process.
It's something that we believe in as a company. We believe that we don't want to have a company come in and buy software that they can't leverage to the maximum ability. Our software is designed to be configurable by that business user, and they're able to take their processes, automatically route them and streamline it. So we're really there to understand what they're doing and build them a system that makes sense.
So from a technology point of view, and I'm going to make some generalizations here because I know EtQ isn't the only one out there.
Sure.
In general, what technology does, though, is it allows the user to help prioritize what they're doing, and also, from what I understand, kind of the transfer of information and the reporting even. I mean, if you identify something as this is a key risk factor, it allows you to assign roles and transfer that information off to the right people to work on it, right? Can you just talk about the aspect of it a little bit? Because I think that's the reporting and the communication part of it, I think, are key.
And that's really one of the true benefits of having the software systems in place, is because, you know, when you're dealing with quality, when you're dealing with safety, it's workflow. And it's all about business process, getting it to the right people, bringing in the data where it needs to be brought in, and helping to provide analysis to make decisions. Software like EtQ and others out there are designed to really foster that automation. Be able to have companies go in, configure the system, match their business processes, route it to the next person, bring in data from other business systems, act as a compliance hub, if you will, and then take all that data and put it into an analysis tool that provides the top level of business intelligence so that people who can make the decisions can make them very easily.
And I think this speaks to something in your article that I have never read before within the topic of risk management, is that it provides, as you alluded to earlier, a universal language.
That's right.
So people may not universally in a company necessarily speak the quality language or the safety language or whatever, but what I think I'm hearing is that the technology, as you're saying, helps to facilitate and the growth of a common language across the entire company
Right.
that facilitates risk management objectives.
That's right. It's all about visibility. It's all about providing that visibility and the ability to interpret it in a way that everybody can understand.
As I mentioned earlier that and maybe you've seen this too. To me, the term risk and risk management has, even in mainstream media, has really been on the rise. Would you say that your industry has seen an increased interest in using the software for risk management? I mean, is this something that has been growing gradually over the last few years, or has it been kind of a big ramp up? It seems like a ramp up to me.
It's becoming more prevalent in a lot of different areas. So I mean, when we started this whole journey, there was a lot of tactical nature to it. It was more to solve specific adverse event issues. But now we're starting to see the enterprise really look at risk and say, hey, I know I'm doing this for quality, but I see tons of benefits for this. I see that risk is really something that my CEO or my C-levels are really trying to look for. And when they go to them and they do the elevator pitch, going to them with a quality statement is one thing, but if they can go in, they have 30 seconds in an elevator and say, hey, let me tell you about the top risks in my department. Yeah. That's going to turn ahead.
And I think you can also see, if you do a web search, and I did 2 years ago on the term risk management, you get financial-oriented risk management results. And now you're getting operational risk management hits.
Yeah, it really seems like, and I'm assuming that a lot of the same tools that have been implemented within the financial arena, I mean, these tools already exist. I mean, and a lot of people, particularly financial people, are already familiar with them. So a lot of it is kind of just taking the same training, I'm assuming, that already exists for the financial folks in terms of how to look at issues and bringing them over into the operational realm.
Yeah, it's like the same dance on a different tune. They're taking a lot from them, and they're adding into their own specific business processes. So, like I said, there's thousands of different ways to do it, but the core risk management processes remain the same.
And we're going to have to wrap up here pretty quick, but we do have, next week, we're going to be talking more in depth on risk management with Tim at a webinar. This is going to be next week on Wednesday. That's the 10th, right?
The 10th at 11 a.m. Pacific.
10th at 11 a.m. Pacific. If you're interested in the webinar and risk management in particular, it's going to be really a lot more great information like this. If you look beneath the player, I think it's the last link, there's a link down there. You click that, that'll take you to a registration page. But tell us a little bit about what we're going to cover in that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we talked about we're going to cover, but for the most part, we're going to take a look at risk at different levels. We're going to look at how the industries are moving faster and how we can learn to benchmark. So we're going to take a look at a couple of the different types of risk that people are looking at. We're going to look at where you use those risks, which industries are using those types of risks, how you can implement them. But we're also going to take a look at saying, how does risk affect design? How can we build risk into design? How can we build risk to the supply chain?
From the design?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it's actually looking at risk right from the very beginning of product development.
Mitigate your risk before you build it.
Okay.
And then look at how you can improve your whole entire process by implementing risk. So it's going to be a good show.
Perfect.